Afternoon all, let's look at a very interesting game from the Luzern Olympiad in 1982, and this game was between Lev Polugaevsky playing white for the Soviet team, which had, by the way, Karpov on board 1, Kasparov on board 2, Brilliancy, and first reserve was Mikhail Tal, second reserve was Yusupov. So not a bad Soviet team for the Olympiad in 1982. And the Czechoslovakian Grandmaster Lubomir Ftacnik, was playing black. So let's have a look. Lev playing white kicked off with knight f3. Now we've seen knight f6 and c4 from Lev. c5, symmetrical English. Knight c3. e6. Lev Polugaevsky decides to fianchetto here. Now black chooses a kind of hedgehog approach now with b6, preparing to parry the light square bishop on diagonal. Bishop g2, bishop b7. White castles, bishop e7, and we go into a kind of hedgehog formation now after d4. C takes d4. White wants to preserve the light square bishop here, so he plays actually queen takes d4, not allowing the exchange of the light square bishop in this position. And white enjoys d-file pressure. d6 is a bit vulnerable, and standard kind of hedgehog position now after d6. Rook d1, a6, b3, preparing potentially either to fianchetto the bishop here, or maybe even put the bishop on a3 to target d6. Might be interesting. Knight bd7, and that shows actually black can flexibly play knight c5 if needed. So maybe d6 isn't such a problem with bishop a3, but we'll check in the second pass here. White plays e4, and then we see queen b8, which puts a lock on e5, really, that black is able to play knight takes e5 perhaps, as well as d takes e5. Now, so the hedgehog seems solid enough here. White chooses bishop b2, so both bishops seem elegantly fianchettoed, with white having a harmonious looking position, respectable. I think Karpov and Kasparov wouldn't be panicking at this stage if they looked over at this board on board 3. So after castles, we see now knight d2, and again this might be a very good powerful maneuver, sporting maybe knight f1 to e3, then maybe f4 at some point, or maybe even a queenside operation with b4 and knight b3. There are various plans available. We see rook d8 from black, which vacates the f8 square for the bishop if needed. a4, indicating to black that don't look forward to any counterplay on the queen side here. And also, of course, a4 is more justified by knight d2 because knight c5, the pawn's already protected. No big problem with b3 it seems. Black plays queen c7. What is black up to? He has to wait with that hedgehog. The hedgehog is prickly. Will white get hurt here? Rook ac8. Now we see the move queen e2. Knight e5, and it looks like a knight which maybe could do with kicking away if it's not such a big deal, to kick it away eventually maybe with f4, but then the diagonal will be weakened, and also knight g4 is possible. So actually white's next move seems to be designed against knight g4, so h3 with the option of kicking that pesky knight away from e5. Black now plays h5. So preparing to lock down at least against g4. So if f4 could answer with knight g4 maybe, knight g6 rather, with an option maybe even of h4 later. So a very interesting move here for Hedgehog fans to play the move h5 here. So the question here is, should f4 really be played? White's position looks quite dominating. As part of this anti-hedgehog system, there's a Maroczy bind against d5. This rook is the only one which doesn't seem to be doing anything at the moment. b5 seems clamped down, d5 seems clamped down. So why not play f4? Doesn't look too bad visually. It is actually played, and we see knight g6 now. So in this position, it looks as though black might actually be threatening something. h4 to undermine f4, and then taking that would be very nice to get the light squared bishop, and then maybe d5 later to try and emphasize this diagonal. Okay, in this position the move knight f3 would seem to address the issue of h4. Why can't white just take on h4 here and just be a pawn up? Well, black now responds in this position very energetically. Can you guess what Lubomir Ftacnik plays in this position if I give you 10 seconds starting from now? Okay, black plays d5. There's a couple of immediate implications. This bishop might be useful for bishop c5 check, and also the queen's eyeing now f4, which means actually h4 works a lot better. It's a lot more effective to play the move h4 if f4 is going to drop now. White takes on d5, and we'll have a look in the second pass why other options might not be so great here, like for example e5. Maybe you'd consider a strong move. Let's check that out in the second pass. For the moment, let's go with the game continuation. C takes d5, and here black now plays this move h4. Okay, should white be worried by this undermining? Well, Lev did take on h4 and allows this naughty queen now to take on f4. Okay, in this position he might not have thought this is such a big deal, this particular position. He plays d takes e6. Now black simply reacts in this position with f takes e6. How dangerous is this hedgehog here? Is black fine here already? Does black have potentially an option of queen takes h4 and just it looks pretty good on the dark squares? Well, white here now played e5, which you could argue from a positional perspective is quite good. If white can maybe exchange off the light square bishops, maybe even the g file can be used, maybe even knight e4 would be powerful. But now it seems black springs into life a little bit. Bishop c5 check, which doesn't give white too many options all of a sudden. White's king seems a little bit fragile. Plays king h1, probably expecting maybe bishop takes g2, queen g2, maybe even to use the g file here. And if any queen e5, well, then there's dangers along the whole diagonal maybe. So maybe that was the kind of expectation, to give up e5 for an attack on g7 here. But white's king is slightly vulnerable. Can you guess what Lubomir played in this position? If I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay. Now, take your move and ask, is it a drag and drop tactic involving the queen? If it isn't, please take the next 10 seconds to find a drag and drop tactic. You want to drag and drop this queen away from the second rank. It's an amazing move. So I want to give you another opportunity. You want a drag and drop tactic. This is the clue. Get this queen away from potentially the second rank. So 10 seconds again, starting from now. I want many of you to be able to find this. Okay, it's a beautiful move. Forget bishop g2. We'll look at that in the second pass. Knight h5, threatening immediately knight g3 check. Pretty nasty stuff to face white, forking queen and king. So the knight has to be taken. So that's dragged the queen away from the defense a little bit of the second rank. Now, what does black play here? Is it really fatal for white for bishop g2? You have to ask yourself that. Perhaps it isn't. So what should black play in this position? If I give you 10 seconds here, what would you play as black? Okay. Black played queen g3. And you'll notice now the power of getting the queen over there with the drag and drop tactic. That this queen is going to take time to get back. And maybe too much time. If the queen goes back now, there's queen h3 using the pin. If bishop takes b7, then queen takes h3 is mate. There's no queen h2. If the queen was there, queen h2. So this is big problem now, threatening mates here and also queen h3. So white tries in this position knight d5. I guess the Soviet team was slightly worried at this stage. Was Lev just playing this positionally and had he planned knight d5 as the refutation here or something? Okay, now black to play really wants to celebrate this diagonal and coordinate these bishops against white's king. Can you find a crushing move for black if I give you 10 seconds starting from now in this position? Okay, rook takes d5, yes. Keep this bishop alive. Rook takes d5. Okay, now we have to look, of course, at bishop d5 and other continuations, but in the game continuation, we'll look at those in the second pass. In the game continuation, in this position, we see the move rook f1, which kind of tries to make use of the fact that this bishop is not pinning this one at the moment. It's been interrupted by its own rook. So maybe now queen f7 is supported, or just maybe, if given the chance, something dangerous anyway could be on the cards here for black. But can you guess what Lubomir plays in this position? Really, really crushing tactic. If I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, queen takes g2. We all love a queen sack. Brings the king out for a double check. Very, very powerful double check tactic, which usually implies the king has to flee. Nothing can be put in the way of both. You can't put your queen in front of that or your rook in front of that. It's double check. So the king has to move here. And in fact, in this position, white resigned. Why did white resign? Let's put on our engine assistant and see. Well, it's actually a mate in 3. King g3, we'd have rook g2 check, king f4, and now rook f8, mating. White only has a couple of queen token moves, so that would be a game conclusion. Wow, look at this coordination of attack against the white king. Beautiful. So this is Lubomir Ftacnik's Immortal game. In fact, throughout the whole Olympiad, the Soviet team dominated. It was only Lev and Polugaevsky who lost a couple of games. As it turns out, Czechoslovakia, they came second in this Olympiad, a fantastic achievement for them, and this was one of the most brilliant games from the 1982 Olympiad, with Lubomir doing really well for his team to help them take that second position in the Olympiad. Okay, let's look at this game again. Also, it should be noted, he helped them also win the silver medal in 1987 as well. So this was the 1982 silver medal. This game contributed. So, okay. We see here white having a standard small advantage you'd expect from a hedgehog. So where did it all go wrong for white? So where did the prickles start appearing in the hedgehog setup? So knight d2 might not have been the most accurate according to engine view here. Maybe bishop a3 was indeed an idea, as I mentioned. Bishop a3 here, provoked knight c5. It's not the end of the story. There's e5 here. This is interesting. Just a break with e5. It's interesting. Okay. So knight d2, maybe we can call this a little bit passive. It's letting black get an ideal optimal setup ready for breaking out. So both rooks together. Okay, black clearly hasn't got b5 on the cards. You would say that black maybe hasn't got much to celebrate here, but he can put a knight on e5 rather irritatingly, and it's that small irritation that provokes some kingside weaknesses here. h3, and already actually the engine actually likes white, likes black technically here. So we see the move h5, which is okay, it's fine to the engine h5. Now f4, I suspect f4 is starting to cause damage to white's king safety on this diagonal in particular. You can see how the damage was felt later. But f4, it can't be retracted. This kind of pawn move, f4. Okay, we see that valuation go up slightly to almost a small advantage. So it needs careful play maybe in some lines now. Now we see the move knight f3. And then it's d5, which the engine stumbled over and then flipping to other options. If we give it a bigger depth, will it find d5 again? An interesting break. It seems entirely logical to make h4 effective here, to play d5. Okay, let's run with d5. And now the engine likes it. It's been given it and it likes it. So doesn't it like it here? It likes it here. It's like learning. You have to force the engine to use a pawn sack to investigate that deeper. And then it likes what it finds. So d5. Okay, we see c takes. And now the possible move h4. Clear advantage. Did you see that flip? h4 clear advantage over a pawn advantage with h4. So this is proving all of a sudden, with this d5 liberating break, to give black really aggressive chances against white's king. And all white seems to have done wrong is maybe having some resources over here which are not really helping towards king safety. And this f4, which, okay, in principle is weakening the diagonal, but now we see kind of wrath of black's position, fury of the hedgehog. The most furious hedgehog game maybe you've seen this year, or maybe all time. I don't know. I don't remember a more aggressive hedgehog for a while. So knight takes h4 was played here. Options. It looks as though white's in trouble. If he plays queen e3, which looks crazy, bishop c5. Okay, there's knight d4 here. e5 takes queen e5. It looks like black's better. Black's having a whale of a time here. That doesn't look good for white at all. So let's go with the game continuation. Knight takes h4. And we saw knight takes h4. G takes. Look at that evaluation for black. Black's doing great here. Attacking prospects. He's got some stuff to look forward to now, especially after d takes e6. Wow. D takes e6 probably didn't help here. So a move like bishop f3, would that be so furious? Bishop d6, queen takes h4. It seems, well, queen g2, bishop e5 is a nice use of the e5 square. Black's doing well, but in the game we saw real fury after d takes e6 was played. So simply f takes e6. Okay, can take time to exploit these weaknesses. They're not running away, all these dark square weaknesses. e5 was played, probably making things a lot worse. Look at that valuation jump, nearly +8 for black. Okay, it's a bad position anyway. So we see bishop c5 check, king h1, and the move knight h5 jumps out at the engine. This drag and drop tactic spotted immediately. Of course, it looks good, and it's pretty hopeless now. Queen takes h5, queen g3, excellent again, brilliant tactic. Knight d5 is played, doesn't really help white. It's actually a forced mate in 7 here. After rook takes d5, we see rook f1, and this beautiful tactical idea is spotted immediately of the double check, bringing the king out here. White resigning, so it could have been rook g2 and an embarrassing mate like this if he had played on. Karpov and Kasparov must have been horrified, as well as Polugaevsky, not to mention Tel and Yusupov. Soviets only defeat in that match actually, so maybe, okay, it didn't contribute a match point, but it was Lubomir's overall performance in all the games which really, I think, helped the Czechoslovakian team secure second in this Olympiad, and it's considered as one of his immortal games. I hope you enjoyed it. So be warned about the hedgehogs. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.